Welcome to Life Stories, where one act of courage echoes through decades. Imagine this. A broke old man opens his door expecting an eviction notice, but instead finds a stranger who knows everything about him. Not just his name, not just his past, but a buried moment he hadn't thought about in 30 years. A moment that unknowingly saved a life. This is a story about motorcycles, memory, and the kind of brotherhood that doesn't end when the engines stop. It will challenge what you believe about justice, about regret, and about how a single choice made on a forgotten day can come roaring back when you least expect it. What happens when the child you once protected shows up at your door with a secret that could break you or set you free? Let's step into the first chapter of a story that proves some debts are never forgotten and some heroes don't even know they wore the cape. The black sedan crept up the gravel driveway like a shadow too late for sunset. Jack Colton watched from behind his tattered curtain, fingers clenched around a chipped mug of instant coffee gone cold. For a moment, he didn't breathe. No one with money ever came up this far, unless it was eviction, legal trouble, or worse. At 72, Jack had seen enough of all three to know the scent of trouble before it knocked. Once, decades ago, this house wasn't a house. It was a clubhouse. Back when the road saints rode thick through the Oregon backroads, when chrome and grit meant something, and Jack was their vice president. Back when they were feared and in rare cases, respected. Now, the patch had faded, the roar of the engine silenced, and the world had long stopped caring about the man once called Viper. He reached for the shotgun out of habit, then thought better of it. His landlord had been sniffing around lately, and Jack figured today might be the day it all came crashing down. He had nowhere else to go, nowhere but memory. Two people stepped out of the sedan. The woman wore a charcoal suit and heels too clean for this part of Riverton. The man beside her was younger, late 30s, tall, African-American, wearing scrubs beneath a light jacket. A doctor, maybe. Jack frowned, his gut twisting. Medical debt? Before they could knock, he opened the door. "You here to take the damn house?" he growled, voice like gravel and whiskey. The woman smiled softly. "Mr. Colton, my name is Rachel Kim. I'm an attorney with Kim and Lasker. This is Dr. Elijah Morgan. We're not here to evict you." Jack squinted, taking them both in. Elijah seemed oddly familiar, but Jack couldn't place him. He wasn't here to reminisce. "I don't need your services, and I sure as hell can't afford them," Jack said flatly. "We're not selling anything." "That," Elijah said, voice steady but thick with something unspoken. "We just need a few minutes of your time. It's personal." That word, personal. It carried weight. Jack stepped aside, wary but curious. The three of them settled into a living room that smelled faintly of motor oil, cat litter, and old tobacco. Diesel, Jack's grumpy tabby, curled up on his lap like a guardian spirit. Rachel opened her briefcase and pulled out a photo. A faded, creased photograph. Jack's breath caught, a row of bikers, black leather, patches gleaming, and in the center, a scrawny black boy with thick glasses and a terrified smile. Jack's younger self stood beside him, a hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. "I've carried this picture for 30 years, Elijah said. Jack blinked. The silence stretched. Then he whispered, "You're that kid." "Elijah Morgan," the doctor confirmed. "I'm that scared little kid. You saved my life." Jack let out a slow exhale. The world tilted slightly. For 30 years, he'd forgotten that name, that moment. It had been just another ride to him, a week-long stunt to protect a bullied kid whose mother had begged for help. The road saints had shown up at that middle school in full force. Jack never imagined that moment meant more than a few startled gasps and a quiet end to a schoolyard war. "I thought I was going to die that year," Elijah said, eyes damp. "I was 12. I was thinking about ending it. Then you showed up with 20 bikers and scared the fear out of every kid in that school." Jack stared at the photo like it was a map to another life. "We didn't do anything special, just gave some punks something to think about." Elijah shook his head. "You gave me worth. You gave me a future." Jack didn't know what to say. The last man who'd said thank you was buried in a pine box outside of town. Gratitude was a rare language, and Jack had forgotten how to speak it. Rachel slid another document onto the coffee table. "Mr. Colton, This is the deed to your house. It's yours now, fully paid. There's also a trust to cover taxes and upkeep for the next 20 years. Jack recoiled as if slapped. What the hell is this? I bought it, Elijah said simply. I looked for you for years. When I heard the property was going up for sale and you were about to be evicted, I did what any friend would do. Jack's voice cracked. I don't take charity. Elijah leaned forward, gaze unwavering. It's not charity. It's brotherhood. The same kind you showed me when no one else gave a damn. The old man's lip quivered. He turned his face to hide the moisture in his eyes. Rachel remained quiet, respectfully still. Finally, Jack spoke. You ever wonder what might have happened if we hadn't shown up that week? I wouldn't be here, Elijah said. And hundreds of kids I've operated on. Maybe not them either. Jack looked down at the deed, the name on it, his name, then up at the photograph. Then, in a trembling voice, you should know, we almost didn't do it. Elijah raised a brow. Jack swallowed hard. Some of the boys didn't think it was our business. A few thought it was a trap. A black kid in a white town. Could have been cops waiting. Could have been bait. He shook his head. But Mrs. Davenport vouched for your mom. And I kept thinking, what if it were my kid? He looked Elijah dead in the eye. I made the call. The doctor's voice was barely a whisper. You saved more than you knew. They sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down. Then Jack stood slowly, joints creaking, but back straighter than before. You hungry? Elijah smiled. Always. Jack shuffled toward the kitchen, calling over his shoulder. I got some canned chili and an old photo album. You might want to see who the real heroes were. As he disappeared into the kitchen, Elijah glanced at the framed photo again, then back at Rachel, who was still seated on the old sofa. He whispered, more to himself than to her. It's strange. The world called them outlaws, but they saved me when no one else would. Rachel looked toward the hallway Jack had gone down. Sometimes, she said softly, the outlaws are the only ones brave enough to follow the law of the heart. What would you have done if you were Jack? Step into danger to protect a stranger's child? Or walk away from someone else's war? Have you ever been saved by someone you least expected, and did you ever get the chance to thank them? Because Jack Colton just did. And he has no idea that the hardest truth is still waiting in the photo album he's about to open. The chili was lukewarm, but neither of them cared. Jack set the dented pot on the table and cracked open 2 cans of store-brand soda. Diesel circled their legs, meowing like he, too, wanted a seat at the table. Jack's hand shook slightly as he opened the battered leather photo album and laid it flat on the scratched Formica surface. The Iron Horseman logo was still embossed on the cover, though faded, like a ghost clinging to flesh. He flipped the first page. That's Bear, Jack said, tapping a finger photo of a burly man with arms like tree trunks and a laugh too big for his vest. Real name was Denny Griggs, heart of gold, fists like cinder blocks, died 5 years back. Cancer. Took it like a fight he planned to win. Elijah leaned in, silent. Jack turned the page again, slower this time. Moose, he said, pointing to a tall man with a boyish grin and a tattoo of a Viking ship across his neck. We called him Tiny. Ironic, of course. He moved out west. Haven't heard from him since the club dissolved. The pages turned. Riders at cookouts, fixing old porches for widows, escorting children to school, one after another. Slowly, Elijah's expression changed from nostalgia to something heavier, more haunted. Jack noticed but said nothing until he turned a page and paused. There was a picture of the entire club outside the old clubhouse, lined up like a small army. Elijah, just a boy, front and center in a borrowed leather vest, 2 sizes too big. I remember this, Jack said softly. That day, we knew we'd done something right. For once, not just raising hell, but raising someone. Elijah looked up, eyes unreadable. I've been looking at that picture for 30 years, but there's something I never told you. Jack leaned back, eyes narrowing. What's that? Elijah hesitated, then flipped ahead in the album, scanning page after page until he found what he was looking for. He stopped at a candid photo, Jack with his arm thrown around a teenage boy in a Road Saints hoodie, both laughing at something out of frame. You remember this kid? Elijah asked. Jack squinted. Yeah. Kyle, one of the prospects, good rider, Always wanted to patch in, but we kept putting him off. Thought he was too hot-headed. Elijah swallowed. He was my cousin. Jack froze. The clock on the wall ticked, the only sound for several seconds. Elijah, I didn't know that. He moved in with us the year after you helped me. His mom passed from an overdose, and my mom, Janelle, took him in, said it was the least we could do for family. Elijah's voice darkened. He worshipped the road saints, talked about nothing else. Jack shifted in his chair, something old stirring in his gut. He was found dead 2 years later, Elijah said flatly. Motorcycle accident. No helmet. Said he was out on a solo ride, trying to prove he was saint material. Jack closed the album, slowly, carefully. I remember that day, he muttered. We were all in shock. We told him not to push it, but he wanted to show he was ready. I never connected him to you. Elijah nodded. I don't blame you for what happened, but I need you to understand something. He leaned forward, voice lower now, trembling. What you did for me, it lit a fire. But for Kyle, that same flame burned too fast. He thought the Road Saints were more than just a biker club. He thought they were salvation. Jack felt it like a punch to the chest. We weren't gods, Eli. We were just a bunch of broken men trying to make sense of the world on 2 wheels. We tried to do right, but we never pretended to be anything more. Elijah's voice cracked. He thought if he could prove himself, he'd matter, like I did, but we didn't protect him like you protected me. Jack's hands tightened on the edge of the table. Guilt, raw and molten, rose in his throat. The old ghost stirred louder now. I've spent my life saving children in trauma wards, Elijah whispered. And every time I see a kid dying from reckless choices, I see Kyle's face, and I ask myself, was I worth saving more than he was? Jack's eyes burned. Don't you ever say that. Don't you dare. You're not responsible for your cousin's death. You carried your scars into something bigger. You became a doctor, for God's sake. And you, Elijah shot back, standing now, you kept this all buried, all these years, and no one ever knew what really happened to Kyle. You buried the story along with him. Jack stood too, trembling but defiant. You think I don't wake up at 3 a.m. wondering who we failed? You think I don't see every kid we couldn't save, every brother who crashed out, every mistake we rode past and never fixed? The room pulsed with unspoken grief. For a moment, both men stood surrounded by decades of silence and sorrow. Diesel meowed softly, the only living witness to a lifetime of roads untaken. Elijah's voice dropped. I didn't come here just to give you a house, Jack. I came here to tell you, I forgive you, but I need to forgive myself too. Jack exhaled slowly. You want to honor Kyle? I already did, Elijah replied, pulling a photo from his coat pocket, his hospital trauma unit's wall, a plaque with Kyle's name. I named the ward after him. The old biker took the photo like it was made of glass, and in that moment, for the first time in decades, he let himself mourn not just a kid, but a brother. Have you ever had to forgive someone not for what they did to you, but for what they couldn't protect you from? Because Jack Colton just uncovered a truth buried deeper than guilt, and what Elijah says next may just break him wide open. In the next part of the story, one final name in the photo album will reveal the deepest cut of all. Jack sat alone at the table long after Elijah left, the worn photo album resting against his chest like armor barely holding in the ache. The sun had slipped behind the pines outside, casting the kitchen in shadows as Diesel paced across the linoleum floor, tail flicking with a nervous rhythm. Jack reached for the last can of soda and cracked it open, the hiss sounding louder than it should in a house so quiet. He hadn't expected the past to come knocking today, certainly not in the form of a polished surgeon with eyes still filled with the same fire as the scared kid from 30 years ago. And he damn sure hadn't expected to hear Kyle's name again. That one hit like a steel pipe to the ribs. Kyle, hot-headed, eager, full of need. A kid who wanted to matter so badly it burned through him. Jack had never told the rest of the club the full story. He'd found Kyle's journal after the crash, hidden in a saddlebag along with a vest he'd stitched himself, a knockoff Road Saints patch sewn crudely onto the back. The pages had been filled with dreams of earning the patch for real. Kyle had written about Elijah, about wanting to be strong for him. If they saved him, Maybe I can save others, he wrote. But first, I have to prove I'm one of them. Jack hadn't had the heart to show anyone, not even Janelle, not even Bear, who would have carried that guilt in his massive chest until it crushed him. And so Jack had carried it alone. He stood now, groaning against the stiffness in his knees, and made his way to the back closet. Reaching behind the dusty coats and folded lawn chairs, he pulled out a box labeled Patches and Past. Inside were relics, old vests, grease-stained gloves, a flask with Bear's initials carved into it. At the bottom, wrapped in a faded red bandana, lay Kyle's vest. The homemade patch was crooked. The fabric still smelled faintly of gasoline and desperation. Jack sat down hard on the floor, the vest in his lap. "You were too damn young," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "And we should have seen it. We should have seen you." His chest tightened, the kind of ache no doctor could fix. And yet in that pain, something else stirred, a strange warmth. Elijah hadn't come to curse him. He'd come to close a wound. Maybe that was the difference between surviving and healing. Maybe that was the last ride the Saints had left to take. The next morning, Jack rose early. He shaved, pulled on his cleanest denim shirt, and brushed Diesel's fur for the first time in weeks. Then he went into town with the photo album under one arm and Kyle's vest under the other. He walked into the Riverton Community Center and signed the guest book at the front desk. "Veterans Story Circle," the girl said cheerfully, pointing him down the hall. Jack nodded, but turned left instead, toward the children's reading room. There, a dozen kids sat cross-legged on a colorful rug, their eyes fixed on Elijah Morgan, who knelt at their level, reading from a picture book about surgery. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Jack. The room went still. Jack held up the vest. "Thought you might want this," he said, voice rough. "It belongs where Kyle's name is written." Elijah stood, taking the vest with both hands, cradling it like something sacred. His eyes glistened. "Thank you," he said. Jack glanced at the children. "Tell him who really saved you, Doc. Wasn't a biker, wasn't even a doctor. It was a scared kid who didn't quit." Elijah smiled. "Maybe, but sometimes you need someone to remind you you're worth saving." That night, back at home, Jack opened a new envelope on the kitchen table. It was an invitation. Elijah was establishing a community initiative in Riverton, a youth mentoring program for at-risk kids. The name? The Road Saints Foundation. The logo, 2 wheels flanking a pair of open hands. And listed beneath advisory board in bold print, Jack Colton, founding mentor. Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the name. He hadn't felt useful in years. Now he wasn't just being remembered, he was being asked to lead. Later that week, he invited Elijah and Janelle, still radiant, still fierce in her quiet way, for dinner. They laughed over burnt pork chops, swapped stories about bear and moose, and for the first time in a long time, Jack let someone into the spare bedroom where his memories had gathered dust. On the wall above the bed, the framed photo of 12-year-old Elijah in his oversized vest now hung beside a new one. Jack and Elijah, arms around each other, the old and the new stitched together in time. A week later, Jack got a call. One of the kids in Elijah's hospital had requested to meet a real biker. Jack showed up in his old boots, riding a restored Harley that Moose had left behind. The boy grinned from ear to ear, and as Jack placed a tiny honorary Road Saints patch in the kid's trembling hand, he realized something. This wasn't about the past anymore. The rumble of the bikes might have faded, the brothers might be gone, but the mission, the heart, was still alive. Jack Colton would never ride in formation again, but he'd ride with purpose. And sometimes in the quiet, when the road outside hummed with faraway engines, he swore he could still hear Bear's deep laugh, Moose's off-key singing, and the ghost of a boy who just wanted to belong. That night, Jack stood at his window, the stars thick above Riverton. He raised a glass of warm whiskey toward the sky. "To the ones we saved," he murmured. "And the ones we couldn't, we ride on." What part of this story moved you the most, and why? If you felt this story deep in your heart, comment 100. Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your country. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Thank you for watching Life Stories.